This meat has been sitting on a wooden shelf in a barn for 6 months. No refrigerator, no freezer, no vacuum seal, no electricity of any kind. The barn has no climate control. Summer heat hit it, humidity hit it, flies landed on the shelf next to it. And yet, when you cut into it right now, it's perfectly preserved. No mold, no rot, no smell. The color is deep, the texture is firm, and if you sliced it thin and put it on a plate in a restaurant in Rome, they'd charge you $45 and call it a delicacy. The only thing that was used to make this happen is a handful of salt that cost less than $2. That's it. No special equipment, no training, no technology invented after the Bronze Age. Just salt, time, and a piece of knowledge that most modern humans have been carefully taught to forget. What you're looking at is salt curing, one of the oldest, simplest, and most effective food preservation methods ever developed by human hands. You take a piece of meat, you pack it in salt, and the salt draws out the moisture. Without moisture, bacteria can't grow. Without bacteria, food doesn't spoil. The process takes days, not hours, but once it's done, the result lasts for months. In some cases, years. No power grid required, no plastic, no industrial processing. A shepherd in the mountains of Portugal does this today the same way his ancestors did it 500 years ago, and the product he pulls off that shelf would pass any modern food safety test you put it through. This is not primitive. This is precision. It just doesn't look like what we've been trained to call advanced. The history of salt curing reads like a history of civilization itself. The ancient Egyptians salt-cured fish from the Nile Delta over 4,000 years ago. It wasn't a luxury, it was infrastructure. It's what allowed them to feed workers building monuments in the desert weeks away from any fresh food source. The Roman Empire ran on salt-preserved meat and fish. The Latin word salarium, the root of the English word salary, literally referred to payments made in salt because it was that valuable not as a seasoning but as a preservation technology. Roman legions carried salt-cured pork across Europe. It's part of what made their supply lines possible. Without it, no empire. Viking longships crossed the North Atlantic stocked with salt cod that remained edible for months at sea. The entire age of exploration, every ship that crossed an ocean from the 15th century onward, was powered by wind and preserved by salt. Columbus didn't have refrigerators, Magellan didn't have freezers. They had barrels of salt-cured meat and fish, and that's what kept their crews alive long enough to redraw the map of the world. In the mountains of China's Yunnan province, communities have been dry curing ham with local salt for over 1,000 years, using methods virtually identical to what's practiced in Spain and Italy today. This isn't a regional trick. This is a global technology. Every civilization that survived long enough to be remembered figured this out independently. So why does almost no one do it anymore? Why do most people alive today have no idea how to preserve a piece of meat without a refrigerator? Here's where the story gets uncomfortable. Salt curing works too well to be profitable for the people who now control your food. Think about what happens if every household knows how to buy meat in bulk when it's cheap and preserve it for 6 months with $2 worth of salt. The refrigeration industry loses customers. The processed food industry loses customers. The preservative chemical industry loses customers. The packaging industry loses customers. Grocery stores lose the weekly trip where you buy perishables because nothing in your kitchen lasts. The entire economic model of modern food distribution is built on one assumption, that you cannot keep food safe without their systems. Salt curing breaks that assumption completely. So it wasn't banned outright. That would be too obvious. Instead, regulations were written that made home curing complicated, intimidating, and in some jurisdictions technically illegal to sell. Health codes were designed around industrial processes, not ancestral ones. The message was consistent and relentless. Home preservation is dangerous. Leave it to the professionals. Trust the system. Buy the product. And within a couple of generations, a skill that every grandmother on earth once had simply vanished from common knowledge. They didn't burn the books. They just stopped teaching the class. And the irony is you already know this works. You just never connected the dots. Have you ever eaten beef jerky? That's salt-cured meat. Prosciutto? Salt-cured for months. Bacon? Cured in salt and sugar before it's smoked. Salami, pepperoni, bresaola, biltong, bacalhau, country ham. Every single one of these is a product of salt curing. You've been eating the result your entire life. You've just never been told how simple the process actually is. The food industry took a technique anyone can do in their kitchen, wrapped it in branding, and sold it back to you at 1,000% markup. That $30 charcuterie board at the wine bar? The core technology behind every item on it is a handful of salt and patience. That's not an exaggeration, that's literally what it is. The science behind it is almost embarrassingly simple. Every living organism, including the bacteria that cause food to rot, needs water to survive. Salt is hygroscopic, which just means it pulls water out of whatever it touches. When you pack meat in salt and the salt draws moisture out of the muscle tissue through a process called osmosis. As the water leaves, the environment inside the meat becomes too dry and too salty for bacteria to survive. Most spoilage organisms need what scientists call a water activity level above 0.9 to grow. Properly salt-cured meat sits around 0.75 to 0.85. That's below the survival threshold for nearly every common pathogen. No moisture means no bacterial growth, means no spoilage. The salt also denatures surface proteins, forming a firm outer layer called the pellicle that acts as a natural barrier against contamination. You're essentially building a biological shield around the food using nothing but the mineral that comes out of the ground. Here's how to do it. Start with a piece of fresh, quality meat. Pork loin, pork belly, beef eye of round, duck breast. These all work beautifully. Weigh the meat and write down the weight. This matters. Calculate 2.5 to 3% of the meat's weight in fine, non-iodized salt. That's your curing salt ratio. If your piece of meat weighs 1 kilogram, you need 25 to 30 grams of salt. Rub the salt thoroughly over every surface of the meat, every fold, every crevice, every side. Don't leave any spot untouched. Place the salted meat on a rack over a tray in your refrigerator, or if you're doing this the traditional way, in a cool, dry space with airflow, somewhere between 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Let it cure. For a small piece like a duck breast, this takes about 2 weeks. For a larger cut like a pork loin, 3 to 5 weeks, you'll know it's ready when the meat has lost about 30% of its original weight. It'll feel firm to the touch, dense, not squishy, not rock hard, somewhere in between. That's your finished product. Slice it thin. Eat it as is, or use it in cooking. It needs no further refrigeration for weeks if kept in a cool, ventilated area. Total cost of salt used, less than $2. Total cost of equipment, a rack and a tray you already own. Here's what most people get wrong, and this is where beginners either succeed beautifully or give up thinking the whole thing is broken. The number one mistake is using iodized table salt. Iodine interferes with the curing process and can leave a metallic, bitter taste in the finished product. Use kosher salt, sea salt, or pure pickling salt. They're cheap and available everywhere. The second mistake is not being precise with the salt ratio. Too little salt and you haven't created a safe environment. Too much and the product is inedible. Weigh your meat. Calculate the percentage. Don't eyeball it. A kitchen scale costs $10 and eliminates all the guesswork. The third mistake is curing in a space that's too warm or has no air circulation. Heat breeds bacteria before the salt can do its job. Humidity without airflow grows mold on the surface. You need cool and dry with gentle movement of air. A basement works, a cellar works, a dedicated spot in your fridge works perfectly for beginners. The fourth mistake is panicking at the first sign of white mold. White mold on the surface of curing meat is almost always benign penicillium, the same family used to make brie and camembert. It's a sign your environment is correct. Wipe it with a cloth dampened in vinegar and move on. Green or black mold is a different story. That means something went wrong with your environment, usually too much moisture. Remove the affected piece and reassess your setup. The results, when done properly, are extraordinary. A single 2 kilogram pork loin cured with 60 grams of salt yields about 1.4 kilograms of finished product that keeps for months. A family that cures 5 to 10 kilograms of meat during a seasonal sale can stock their pantry for half a year without a single kilowatt of electricity. Scale it further and you reach what homesteaders a century ago considered normal. Entire families went through winter on cured pork, cured beef, and salt fish stored in the cellar. No generator, no freezer, no anxiety during a power outage, and the flavor is incomparable. Commercial cured meats are rushed through industrial processes with accelerants and additives to cut time and maximize profit. A home cured bresaola that